We don't make it. Yeah. Have you got more to do? Or? No, I'd just like to give over to Manton, and Manton can take you through some of the sections A through D.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Yes, I'll just run over some highlights of those areas that Paul's hit on there, and if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask those as we go. So I'm going to be looking at page 42, which is the section A, and looking at the groups of activities, and just really, I guess, from our focus, which is the net funding requirement that the council needs to put into those groups of activities. So each of those activities will have their own income, whether that be targeted rates, grants, or kind of consent charging or things like that will come into those activities. But I guess we're looking or focusing on what we have to fund from our general rate and from our regional income as an indication of how those projects are running. And as Paul said, we look at that on a pro rata basis. So at today's meeting, we're looking at around about that 33 for a third of the way through the year, and just comparing where those are at. So strategic planning is our first group of activity, which is to do with economic development and strategic development. They are running slightly over in expenditure, or net expenditure, as in what we need to fund from our general fund. That's the way of looking at it. And the reasons for that is we're just the timing, really, of how we can do our contributions for economic development is a little bit heavy at the beginning of the year rather than constant all the way through. So that's really the main reason why their expenditures are a bit up. They're pretty confident that'll come back as we go through the year. And for all of these, you can have a look at some more detail further on if you wish as we go. The next is land and drainage, again slightly over the net funding that they require on a pro rata basis. The opposite's true in this case. Their expenditure is probably okay, but their income is a little bit down due to the fact that we do a lot of consultancy work with our engineers, which is still in progress, and we don't bill that until obviously it's completed. So that's the reason that they're slightly over on that 33. Regional resources, which is our science work, the air, land, water, coastal activities there. As Paul alluded to, their expenditure usually increases during the year. They're building up their planning stage at right now, and then obviously external consultants will come in at a later stage, and that's a large portion of the costs involved there.
So why doesn't your planning reflect that? I mean, why are you overrunning on the why doesn't your planning reflect that there's going to be a lot of work done in the front end? What your actual budget? Right.
I guess it's just it's just how the pro rata works. We could split it evenly as we've done and explain why the difference is. We could potentially do a pro rata for each of these groups of activities because they do have different seasonal variations which are pretty consistent year by year. It's just, I mean, if you guys would like to see that, we can do whatever we'd like. But
I would, because it's like an orchard budget, isn't it? I mean, we know when we're doing our thinning, and we do that for 100 years. We've done it at the end, so we apply the cost to that. So it just means you wouldn't have to explain this. It would be 5% or 2% range.
Anything's possible. We can definitely look at that.
Can I also suggest that you cross-reference your narrative to the actual reports, which would make it really easy, like strategic planning at 36%, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just put in brackets page X, so that we can actually go back and we can relate your comments to the actual financial reporting, make it a hell of a lot easier for us to follow.
Yep, just if I could add comment on that pro rata, because Manton and I did talk about it before the meeting. We thought it may be raised, actually, because certainly in business budgets you do pro ratas. Where you get to there, of course, is when a group manager then does a pro rata, and they will do that, and they will say, yes, we're going to do it and do this work in these 2 or 3 months, but then they don't. Then our reporting will be more in the nature of why the variances are different to what a manager thought it was going to be, whereas what we've got here is talking about trends in expenditure. So you probably end up with similar explanations.
Can I just respond to that? I'd be happier with that, Because if we make, as Rex said, a decision that we're going to do X in these first 3 months because of this, and we don't pro rata our we allocate the funds, the lumpy way as we go through, and it turns out that the money hasn't been spent as expected, we then don't have a financial explanation, we have a management explanation, and we want to know why it hasn't been done as planned. That's a different explanation, and I think it's a much more important one, and I think it would be much more valuable to us. So we're just doing it in terms of pro rata, we're explaining the lumps and bumps. It's financial. But if we, management, say we're going to spend most of our budget in the first 3 months, and then so we have a whole stack of money allocated the first 3 months and nothing much for the last night, and it isn't spent, well then the management team have to explain to us why they haven't done the work in the first 3 months they thought. So we've got a management discussion there.
No, take your point, Kim.
Or worse still, why is he 20% over, which is more frightening.
Which is good. Can we just direct the questions through the chair? All
Sure.
useful, sure. But
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Collins.
Sure, I'll finish off as we've got today, but we will definitely have a look at what we can do there. Where are we up to? Sorry, regulation. Regulation, obviously.
Before we look at anything, I have an agreement on this. It's a council decision if we change the reporting format, and I guess some of us have a lot of experience of how this works and what the variations are likely to be. So I just ask that when it's looked at, we do keep on mind that.
I agree with that, Councillor, but there has been some useful suggestions, certainly in the linking stuff in particular, and the measurement, which I think is where Councillor Barker was coming from, how we actually measure against this budget. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, would it be possible to make that adjustment to pro rata for the new year? We're 5 or 6 months into this one. Would that be, yeah.
That's right. Good point. Mr. Collins.
Great. Obviously, yeah, so consents compliance is looking like it's taking a lot of it's a lot over net expenditure from where we are, but that again is they do a lot of their billing at the end of the year, so that will come down in line with budget. Biosecurity do a lot of their work is seasonal during the summer kind of autumn months, so the expenditure will pick up there. And really only other one is transport, which looks a bit horrific there, but that is really just a small amount of money on a small budget line, and they do, for the Road Safe program, do purchase a lot of their promotional equipment or goods and services for their promotion at the beginning of the year, and that kind of will stem off from now and should be under budget.
So, I mean, that's a good example of what was said. You can say that is tracking because we were going to spend 3/4 of it in the first quarter, and that's quite simple, isn't it? So,
I wish you did explain, is it?
Great. We do talk a little bit about our operations group and how they are tracking. At the moment, they're slightly behind their budget, kind of 27% instead of around the 33%, which we'd expect. I've had a chat to them. They've got some big contracts coming up, some big tenders that they've won, so they're very confident that they will be back on track over again. They do a lot of work in the summer months as well, so they are not too concerned, so we'll keep track of that and let you know how that is going. Paul's already talked about regional income.
For you, can I just just so I know, operations group, that's the bulldozers and tractors and
Correct.
bits and pieces out at Taranau.
Yes.
That's those.
Yeah, so they're a separate business unit, so they keep their own accounts, they do everything, and then it comes back through us again, just to oversight and that kind of thing. There's a discussion on Heat Smart, just for your information, basically on how that's tracking. I think you may have already been talked through that, and obviously the work that they've done through the winter months. And on page 44, we briefly talk about, actually it doesn't look so brief there, we talk about the non-recoverable kind of appeals and referrals that are going through the environmental court that we've got at the moment. So there's only a couple there, and I won't delve into that unless anyone's got any questions on it.
Or before you leave, any questions on that? Okay.
Great, and probably the last section, which is of interest, is the balance sheet on page 45. So the comments on 45, the balance sheet itself is on page 57, if you'd like to track as we go. So we do a comparison to where the balance sheet was at the beginning of the year and where it is now. And again, this is, after a bit of time here, you understand how the fluctuations of the balance sheet go. The couple of major ones there, I guess, which stand out. Point 45, which is the investment property, has decreased by about 1.4 million, and that's just due to continued sell down of some endowment lease properties that we've had for the year so far. I think there's been 14 of those coming through. So obviously the investment property decreases as we sell those, and the funds come back into the investment side of things. Point 47 is the accounts receivable is obviously increased by 15 million, which is our rates, which are put out in October. So invoices are sent, and we are due at that point, but we give people till January to pay those as such. So they're accounts receivable until those funds are received. So it's just a normal yearly fluctuation that we have on the balance sheet. The other side of that is down in point 53, which is our income in advance, where we basically get that accounts receivable that we have there, and it's the other side of that is we've got this income in advance, which we smooth over the year just to give some consistency in our reporting. And the only other one that kind of stands out is accounts payable, which is reasonably high at this time of the year, just due to we've got a large GST payment to make of 2 million on those rates that we just rated. So that's another yearly kind of fluctuation, which we will no doubt get used to as we go along. That's really the only things I wanted to highlight, and if you had any questions, that we can take those now if you'd wish. But I guess as a general summary, we're pretty happy with where things are at, on track with how they usually are, and the budgets.
There's no outliers that are excessively concerning. Okay. Round the table, any questions in regard to this? Councillor Barker.
I've read these reasonably carefully, but what I would like as a request, could I have a briefing on the accounts? Could I come in here one day and someone take me through all the various elements of it? Because there's so many little pieces here, sort of schemes here, pieces there. I'd just like to sit down and be able to go through it piece by piece. Is that okay?
Absolutely, and actually on that note, does anyone else wish to do that as well? Yeah, sure. It's a good idea. Have a briefing, turn up here and go through a set of accounts and explain every little wee piece which it is. I'd like to know, because on the basis of good detailed information, you can then make some things. It's only one question I've got, worthwhile. I see that we're on page 58. We've got our money pie here. I see that we've got it spread around Westpac, ANZ, Kiwi Bank, BNZ, ASB. I noticed we haven't got any in the local building society, HBRC, but never mind, put that aside. I see we've got 2% in equities. What are our equities we've got money in?
That covers the Regional Disaster Reserve Fund, which is approximately 3.6 million at the moment, and it's Council's policy that 30% or up to 30% of that value of that fund, currently 3.6 million, can be invested in equities, and we have an advisor, Pearson Investments down in Wellington, and he and his staff have advised us for the last, as long as I've been here anyway, 14 years on where to put the money in by way of equity. So it's not a lot of money. But it is for the Regional Disaster Fund to get a balance between equities and government stock. Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy with that.
And we will.
I've been speculating on the red beans in
Kansas.
In Chicago or something like that.
We'll give you a report on that at a later stage.
Councillor Grant.
Mr. Chair, so I would really value half a day or 3 hours just sitting with the finance crew and just understanding, all the different departments. But I have to say that from a really bottom line presentation point of view, I would like to, on page 47, so just the P&L for the month. I would like a lot more information on it, but I want to present it differently. I would like to sit and have discussion. I understand what Councillor Scott's saying, but this does not tell me anything about how we are tracking. And that's our job here, is we need to know, come here every month and say, this is how much we've spent against the budget for the month, against the budget for the year, and how we're tracking. And if we don't do that, I can't see how we can act in a proper governance way on the finances. I just can't see. It just doesn't tell me anything about how we are tracking. I'd like to see, and I'd like to understand some of the detail, but it's the bottom line that really is important. Are we $1 million over or $1 million under? How are we tracking on a monthly basis? So I would like to see a different presentation on our front page.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman, I think moving to a true pro rata will give Councillor Graham what he wants, because commercial reporting, you have your pro ratas, i.e. your expectation of your business, and your comments then have you moved away from your expectation. This here is a different way of presenting. I mean, we've got used to it, and it's served as well. It's done on trends, past trends, and assuming that most of it is fairly even, and if not, why not? But a true pro rata will require management reporting, which I've certainly an advocate of, rather than straight financial reporting. And I'll certainly be writing out to group managers to advise them of the change in the new year and some of the benefits of that, and what they'll need to provide for that. And I'm sure they'll be very comfortable.
Something we can talk about further too, obviously. Thank you, Councillor Graham. Councillor Dick?
Yes, the changes in reporting, I think, would be useful if it could be summarised by Paul, rather than a collection of ad hoc suggestions, if I call them that with respect, and advise the next council meeting, or even to corporate if there's time. Just so I can see them in their totality, in a global way. And I guess the other comment that I'd make, and this is just me, and I don't expect everyone to operate in this manner, but personally, I'm not interested in looking at every line item. What I want to be informed of is exceptions and when things are going wrong. And I guess I've been around this place long enough, know the staff here well enough to know that if there is something that needs to be highlighted or for us to be cautioned about, we're going to be told by our staff.